Hi, this is Danny Jarabek here with Awards Radar, and I am very overjoyed to be speaking today with Rosalind Chao. She is one of the stars of the Netflix series Three Body Problem. Rosalind, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you? It's wonderful to speak.
I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. Just starting off with Three Body Problem. First of all, it is an epic series. It is incredible to watch unfold, and you're of course at the epicenter of it with your character, Ye Wen-jie. Just kind of to start it off, I'd love to hear from you if you had any sort of relationship with the source novel. It's of course very popular, and it was a big deal when it was going to become an adapted series. So if you had any relationship to it, or if you developed a relationship to it once you kind of entered the project.
Well, first of all, it's so good to finally be out in the open because before this, I was not allowed to say who I was playing. I was not allowed to say so much about it. And prior to meeting with Dan, David, and Alex, I really had no exposure to Three Body Problem other than a phone call I'd received from Benny when I was filming Better Things in London. And he had said he's working on this super secret project. And I said, well, what is it? And he's like, Three Body Problem. And I was like, what's that? I don't know what it is. He's like, oh, you can't tell anybody. But so that was my first exposure to it. And then once I met with Dan and David, gosh, that was quite a bit later. Um, they mentioned the book, and then Alex, in a meeting, Alex told me basically Ye Wen-jie's story. And so that was my first exposure. And then I had a Chinese coach because the woman who plays the young me, Zine, has, she's from Asia and has an accent and the whole thing. So, I had to work on melding the two cultures for when yeah is eventually in London with English dialogue coaches, and then there was a Chinese coach as well that I spoke to, and he's the first one who said, I said, I'm not going to read the book first because the script is very different, but this Chinese dialogue coach Sun Yan said, and he looks very strict, and he said, no, you have to read it, it's a big deal in China. And he was explaining the whole thing to me, and what the Hugo Award winning and blah blah blah. And so that was my assignment. I was working on another show called Sweet Tooth at the time, but he gave me a deadline that I had to read Three Body Problem and finish it by our next week's meeting. And I have to tell you, I was enthralled when I read the book. Were you?
I haven't read the book. I've only watched the series,
Oh, well, maybe you could listen to the
so that
audio.
this is my assignment now.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll get Sun Yan to call you up. He looks very strict. He's very sweet, but he looks strict.
Kind of speaking with Three Body Problem, it's incredibly dense, complex script. There's a lot of really kind of heavy sci-fi elements to it. When you received the script, how did you start to unpack that and kind of delve into the nuances and the complexities of what this project is going to bring?
Very slowly, I kind of it did feel a little overwhelming at first, because of scheduling issues. I was juggling a couple things at the same time, so I knew that the last scene was going to be filmed first. So I really had to get all the way through mentally. Normally I do it much slower, but in this case, I had to really, put my foot on the gas, and really break her down in psychologically, much quicker than I normally would. Because we had to do a condensed filming of my stuff in about 2 to 3 months, maybe 3 months. So they had to pack it in, so that they could squeeze all my scenes in before I had to go back. to New Zealand for Sweet Tooth. So I was really, hyper focused.
Mhm.
I can't remember the question. The question was, how did I break it
Yeah,
down?
just how did you unpack it and break it down? There's so many nuances and complexities and just a lot of elements going on with what happens with the story.
Well, her background, first of all, was something that I was slightly, familiar with from my upbringing, from what my parents had told me, grandparents, and aunts and uncles, great grands and aunts and uncles had minimally shared with me. And but I still understood the after effects of it. So from that standpoint, I felt like I had a little bit of a head start. Um, and then, I mean, I have a cousin, a distant cousin who had actually gone through a lot of what had gone through. And then, as far as, there's so much there that, you just have to find the empathy for the
Mm.
character. I found that rather easy. I mean, I am a mother, I am a science nerd, I hate to admit, but that was in my past life. Um,
A
so,
perfect fit for, yeah.
well, I'm not a prodigy. She was quite a prodigy, and so I don't have that in my arsenal. But uh, yeah, I felt that she was so well written that they really did most of the work for me, to be honest. She was really well written. I mean, the script was amazing. I've been totally spoiled by them.
Yeah, you alluded to something that I did want to touch on, and that is Ya's background, because of course there's a lot of elements of Chinese history involved in this, and also the fact that just her knowledge base that she develops very young in life is so critical to the story unfolding. How did you kind of tap into and sort of immerse yourself in the background of who Ya was?
Well, I do know that, uh, being a prodigy affects your life in so many ways. It affects who you are. It affects your confidence level as far as that your decision making. And I think since from an early age, she really was perceived as above and beyond uh, the rest of her crowd in science, prior to her father's what we first see unfolding in the first scene. I think she has an inner confidence that allowed her to, make the decisions that she made, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't know if you're,
Subjective.
and I don't know if your people have seen the whole thing or not, but yeah. So I'm trying to not give anything away in case there's spoilers, but
Yeah, it's an incredibly, I mean, what I really love about the script and how it kind of unfolds is this complexity of choice and the ways that different people will react to crises. And I think that's a lot of what's at the core of what Three Body Problem is. How did you kind of find your way into that theme and kind of dealing with the way that Yeah approached it versus maybe how you would approach it, like how do you kind of mentally unpack and work around that?
that's a great question. It's applicable to a lot of what's going on today as well. I feel like the first three episodes of Three Body Problem, three to four, are sort of the development of all the characters and who they are. And so that leads us to find an empathy for all the characters and understand why each person makes the decision that they make. And
Mhm.
that's overall, umbrella looking at the story. And as far as Yeah goes, the first three episodes really build on that, on who she is. And then, I get to take the ball and, run it to the goalpost because I think that's when it gets really fun for me. That Yeah, is not what she appears to be, and you know, she's practical because to survive in an intense political environment, I think no matter what country it is, if it's that politically charged, one has to be very one learns a practicality that maybe we in growing up in the United States haven't learned. I mean, I know I probably would have been, yeah, that I'm not quite so politically blessed, let's put it that way. Whereas I think, yeah, really thinks in the long term versus the short term. And I think the Chinese culture also, when I look at people from, my parents' generation, the generation before that, they are able to invest in the long term in a way that we, I think much more short term sometimes. So she's thinking in the long range, I think. And in her mind, if you have to, step on a few bugs first, I wouldn't act the same way, but I understand where it comes from. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, and I agree with the way that there's just this like kind of like deep character development, deep character building, that makes you kind of be able to see yourself in the shoes and understand those decisions they make.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling people, like when people start to watch it, I always say you have to binge. You've got to binge at first because it really gets going, after I'd say episode 4, would you say? 3 is
Well,
great.
episode 4 certainly got a turn in it, as you're well aware.
Yes. But 1 through 3, it's beautiful. They're just, well, you're studying architecture. Am I allowed to say that? So
Sure.
you're doing the you're building, oh now I'm gonna really embarrass myself, but you're building the base of the structure, right? And if you build a really strong base, then the story, no matter where it goes, can withstand any earthquakes that might happen. How about that for really bastardizing the metaphor of your architecture studies? Sorry.
I appreciate it. Well, one of the most fascinating components of your characters is it's of course split into two timelines in the show with two different portrayals. Can you speak at all or elaborate on like what the collaboration process was with Zine and how you two went about building one character together?
There was no collaboration with Zine because she had they just sent me her materials. She filmed first, and then it was my job to adapt in every way to how she played it. Scheduling, we weren't sure if I was going to be able to do it, blah, blah, blah. So they sent me all her footage. It had already been filmed. And then even when I think there's in episode 3, went a little bit later, they were very clear that, language, everything, I kind of adapted to how Zine, as a person is. And then that kind of fueled how I played. Yeah, because, had I not seen her performance, I might have played a little bit differently, but it's, it's really important to meld the two. She can't go from being a letter to a number, you know what I mean? It was easy because her performance starting, I saw episode 1, and that is sort of where I took I built from seeing her responses in episode 1, I think. I'm trying to think, was episode 2 in there? I think it was an amalgamation of 2 episodes. I didn't see the scene where she meets with the young Jonathan Pryce until later, but I asked the second they filmed that scene if they could send that footage to me, because that was the closest timeline. It was still like 30 years, 20, 30, maybe like 40 or 50 years before my old lady yet shows up. So I did have to adapt that one pretty quickly, because just in case there were any changes. But I had there were wonderful dialogue coaches on board, and I'd done an English accent. I'd done a play in England previous to this. So I had the English accent sort of down, and then we had to tint it with Zine's real accent to make her, to make it believable.
No, that's really cool to hear how, you were able to even split, just not even meeting really or collaborating beforehand, how you're able to make it mesh together into one character so well.
We met I was having breakfast one morning, and she came and took a picture. She ran up and, oh, can I have a picture with you? And took a picture with me. And then that was, it was very brief. And then I think she said, oh, Derek's leaving today. I'm so sad. And she left, and then I watched her walk away, and so tried to nab a little bit from that, and that was kind of it.
Speaking to another one of the relationships that you have in the show, I was really compelled by the scenes you have with Benedict Wong's investigator character. You share a lot of time with him. Can you speak to just the relationship you had in developing those scenes together with another incredible actor in Benedict?
Well, Benny and I definitely did work together, and we had done quite a few table reads during the pandemic, scripts that were being developed. And I think he reached out to me after our first one. And so we had sort of a text email relationship. And then when I got out there, we did get together, and we have mutual friends. So I have known him for quite a while. And actually, honestly, the same happened, a relationship happened with Jin as well, because Jess was living in New Zealand at the time that I was in New Zealand filming Sweet Tooth. So after we filmed the first section with Jess, I went back to New Zealand to film for 5 months, and then we came back and did the scene of Jess and I, that final scene between Jess and I. I'm trying to not give you spoilers, but that final scene between Jess and I. And because we already had that relationship in New Zealand, and a very close relationship in New Zealand, it really did feed the scenes, that last scene where she confronts me. I just got goosebumps thinking about how well that worked out, timing wise.
Just one more question for you. You alluded to this a bit before in some of the human components of what this is, because it's such a really rich and textured science fiction, but there's also so much humanity and empathy embedded into it. Just the fact that your character's also a mother, what are some of the human qualities that you wanted to kind of embed into as well?
That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that. Are you sure you want to be an architect? You should. That's a very good question, because that's the part that was so easy to hang my hat on, but I had to approach it in a different way than Rosalind would approach it. The regrets that one has when you're raising child, a daughter especially, that the fears that you've screwed up here or screwed up there, they're small in comparison to screw ups. I'll say screw ups in case PG audience. So the screw ups are huge, but one can always identify. The one thing I did have to do is I had to tamp that down, because and that was the beauty of having wonderful directors to work with. And Dan and David and Alex were really good about making sure that I didn't respond in the maternal way that Rosalind would respond, that I responded in the way of someone who, yes, had made mistakes, but had fierceness in her that felt like that was a price you had to pay for the long range goals. I don't know how she did it. I think she effed up. But anyway.
Well, Rosalind, thank you so much. It was amazing to hear a little bit behind the scenes of the process making of this character. It's an incredible character and an incredibly epic series, as I said. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciated getting to chat with you about Three Body Problem.
It was a pleasure.